In the previous video, we looked at creating our own menu tab from scratch, which is located at the bottom here. And the way that we did this is that we hard-coded these menu item values into the display just as placeholders. In this video, we're going to have a look at creating a service which can dynamically load this data, and eventually later on in this video series, we'll link that service to extract data from a database through a PHP endpoint. In order to get started, you'll need to have your Ionic app running. If you don't know how to get to this stage, you should definitely check out the second video in this series, which teaches you how to download, install and set up Ionic on a Cloud9 IDE environment and have it up and running just like I do right here. So head into your IDE or your development environment, open the www folder in your Ionic project, and then double click to open the services.js file. As you can see here, there's a demo factory declared. What we want to do is simply copy and paste this and refactor it to our needs. We have a copy of that factory here, and we're going to call this factory database because later on we'll be changing our service to interact with an actual MySQL database. You need to get rid of the semicolons here, otherwise it's going to throw an error. And basically, in a factory declaration, you need to give it a name and then a function that carries out the work and return some arguments. So in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called menu, and it's going to be an array of objects, and that can be done like this. So let's just create the shell. Our menu for now is just going to have 4 items, because I doubt I can think of more than 4 items at the top of my head. Let's give each item a name. So we'll have water. Now we have this static variable which isn't going to change, but eventually this is going to be replaced by data populated from a database. We need to create a function that allows us to return this menu item. So all we need to do now is declare a function here and give it a name. So we're going to call it get menu. It's going to take no arguments, and it's simply just going to have the role of returning the menu item. So it's essentially a getter function. Now factories must have a second argument of a function which returns values that can be accessed. So what we need to do here is create a return variable, and we're going to say that we want to return an object because we're going to have multiple functions in here soon. So the value for get menu should return the function get menu, and later on we might have other things like get users. So we can put get users, and this will throw an error because get users isn't defined, and all we really want to do is just create a shell function for that for now, which we'll come back and fix later on. Just leave a note to ourselves that it does nothing. So if we hit save there, we should be able to reload our application without any errors being thrown. If we do throw an error, it's probably because something in our service file has been mistyped. So no errors and nothing has changed yet because we haven't implemented it. So now we want to go back over to our controllers and find the controller that we made yesterday, which is the menu controller. Now in the function that's passed as an argument to the menu controller, we want to inject the database service, and we do this by simply typing in the name of the service that we just created. We can now access the database simply by calling its functions like this, and this will return that menu item that's located in services. Now you can see that this would be very useful because we could add the code here to make a request to our REST API or our database and not have to clog up all the code in the controllers that controls the view from here. Now what we want to do is we want to add that menu value to the scope. So we're going to create a scope variable called menu, and we're going to assign it the value that it gets from the database service and the get menu function. So if we just add a console.log here and just say value of menu is, and then tell it to print the value of the scope menu variable, we can go ahead and refresh our application again. And looking in the developer tools console, we should see the values appear. So you can see that we have an array of 4 objects, and each object is the values that we just set earlier. Now that we have the values assigned to our scope, we can head over into the templates for our menu here. And remember, we call it tab menu. And we're going to use something called an ng repeat directive, which comes from Angular and can be harnessed in Ionic. And that simply works as a for each loop, and I'll show you how. So we're going to take one of our cards here, which are obviously being repeated. So each of these cards represents one item on the menu. And what we're going to do is we're going to add an ng repeat to it here. So anything that goes within the tags here is called a directive. And then we need to give it some sort of Angular condition to make it loop through those items. Now, as I said, it's like a for each loop. So therefore, we're going to have to tell it what the for each expression is going to be. So the expression we're going to use in our ng repeat is simply going to be item in menu, where menu represents the scope.menu item that we declared in our controller. An item is just a temporary variable that is available within these 2 div tags. Now we can refactor whatever's inside the content here to item.name. And we know we're setting it to the name because if we look in the values that we printed through the console.log, we can see that name here is within each index of the array called menu. And next to that, we're just going to quickly and simply print the price too, and we'll just hard code the currency symbol in for now. And again, just put item.price, and that should print the price. So just save that and refresh your application, and you should now see your items appear, which we added in the service. So we can clear up the static menu items here because we don't really need them as placeholders. And if we go back after saving and refresh our application again, you should see that they have disappeared, and we should only have the items that we are returning from our service. To prove that this works, I'm going to head back over to our services.js file, and I'm going to add another item. So this time we're going to call it pasta, and we're going to give it a price of 20 and hit save. Head back over to our application and hit refresh, and you'll now see that pasta has been added to our menu list. Later on in this series, when we go into more depth with the Angular UI router and talk about dynamic states and routing, we'll talk about how you can click onto these and then show individual item pages for each menu item. But for now, that's how you use services in Ionic to get dynamic content. And at some point, we're going to have a look at integrating our database service with a PHP endpoint so we can extract real data from a database.